He's covered in gemstones: sardius, topaz, diamond, beryl, onyx, jasper, sapphire, emerald, carbuncle. 9 stones set in gold, woven into his very being. He's on the holy mountain of God, walking among stones of fire. He is described as the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. And then, 1 verse later, the text says iniquity was found in him. Something broke inside the most magnificent being God ever created, and the Bible never tells you exactly what it was. That's the part nobody talks about, not the fall itself. Everyone knows that part, or thinks they do. The part nobody talks about is what was happening before. What was this being? What was his purpose? What did he look like, sound like, do? And what could possibly go wrong inside a creature described as perfect in beauty and full of wisdom? A being who had eaten everything that would make him look at God and say, "I want your throne?" The story of Lucifer before his fall is scattered across the Bible like pieces of a shattered mirror. No single passage tells the whole story. You have to pull fragments from Isaiah, Ezekiel, Job, Luke, and Revelation, written across centuries by different authors, and lay them side by side. And when you do, the picture that emerges isn't the cartoon devil with horns and a pitchfork. It's something far more complex, far more tragic, and far more relevant to your own life than you've ever been told. Let's start with the name itself, because most people don't know that Lucifer isn't actually in the original Bible. But the word appears exactly once in the English King James Version, in Isaiah 14:12. "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning?" But in the original Hebrew, the word isn't Lucifer, it's Hillel, and it means shining one, or morning star. It's a reference to Venus, the brightest object in the sky before dawn. The planet that rises brilliant and high, then vanishes when the sun comes up. The word Lucifer entered the Bible through Jerome's Latin Vulgate translation in the 4th century. In Latin, Lucifer simply means light bearer, from lux, meaning light, and fere, meaning to carry. It wasn't originally a proper name. It was a description, a title, the light bearer. Jerome wasn't naming the devil. He was translating a Hebrew metaphor about brilliance and downfall. But over the centuries, the Latin word got capitalized, turned into a proper noun, and became permanently attached to the figure of Satan in Christian imagination. By the time Dante wrote the Inferno and Milton wrote Paradise Lost, Lucifer was synonymous with the devil, and the image was locked in. But here's the part that makes this complicated. Isaiah 14 isn't actually about the devil, at least not directly. Isaiah 14 is explicitly identified, in the text itself, as a taunt against the king of Babylon. Verse 4 says it plainly, "You will take up this taunt against the king of Babylon." The passage is a funeral song, a mocking dirge celebrating the downfall of a tyrannical ruler. The figure described in verses 12 through 15 is called a man in verse 16. He's compared to other earthly kings in verse 18. He has a physical body. He's buried, or rather, he denied proper burial as a final humiliation. Many modern scholars argue that Isaiah was drawing on an ancient Canaanite myth about a lesser god named Atar, who tried to seize the throne of the chief deity Baal on Mount Zaphon, and was thrown down to the underworld for his arrogance. Isaiah took this well-known mythological image and applied it to the king of Babylon as political satire. You think you're going to ascend to heaven? You think you're going to set your throne above the stars of God? Look at you now. thrown into the pit, covered in worms. The kings of the nations all rise from their thrones to look at you and say, "Is this the man who shook the earth?" That's the original meaning of the passage, a poetic taunt against human arrogance. But early Christian readers saw something else in the language, and they connected Isaiah 14:12, "How you have fallen from heaven," with Jesus' statement in Luke 10:18, "I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven." They read the 5 "I will" declarations in Isaiah 14. "I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit on the Mount of Assembly. I will ascend above the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High." And they heard the voice of something older and darker than any Babylonian king. By the 2nd century, Tertullian was applying Isaiah 14 to Satan. By the 3rd century, Origen was building an entire theology of Satan's fall around it. And by the time Augustine wrote in the 5th century, the connection was cemented. The king of Babylon's arrogance became a window into the primordial rebellion of heaven's most exalted angel. Was that Isaiah's intention? And almost certainly not. But did the early Christians see a real pattern underneath the surface? That's a different question entirely. And the answer depends on what you do with Ezekiel 28. Now, completely separate from Isaiah, let's go to a different book, a different prophet, and a different passage that describes something that sounds like it cannot possibly be about a human being. Ezekiel 28. The prophet is delivering a lament against the king of Tyre, a real historical ruler of a wealthy Phoenician trading city. Verses 1 through 11 describe this king in terms that clearly apply to a human. He's proud. He claims to be a god. He's made wealthy through trade, and he's about to be destroyed. But then, in verse 12, the language shifts dramatically. But the text stops sounding like a political prophecy and starts sounding like something from another dimension entirely. You were the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone adorned you: sardius, topaz, diamond, beryl, onyx, jasper, sapphire, emerald, and carbuncle, all crafted in gold. On the day you were created, they were prepared. The king of Tyre was not in Eden. The king of Tyre was not created. He was born. The king of Tyre was not covered in gemstones woven into his being. Something here has shifted. The prophet has moved beyond the human ruler and is describing the spiritual force behind the throne. Verse 14. You were an anointed guardian cherub. I placed you there. You were on the holy mountain of God. You walked among the stones of fire. Named a cherub, not a human king, a cherub. In the Hebrew Bible, cherubim are the highest order of angelic beings. They guard the throne of God. They're described on the Ark of the Covenant, with wings outstretched, overshadowing the mercy seat. They appear in Ezekiel's vision of God's glory. Terrifying, multi-faced, covered in eyes, burning with fire. And this particular cherub wasn't just any cherub. He was the anointed guardian. The word translated anointed is the Hebrew mimshach, from the same root as Mashiach, Messiah, meaning anointed one. This being was anointed, set apart, given a position of unique privilege and authority among the hosts of heaven. Verse 15. You were blameless in your ways from the day you were created until wickedness was found in you. Created perfect, blameless, faultless from the beginning. But and then, something changed. The text doesn't give you a detailed play-by-play. It doesn't describe a dramatic confrontation or a heavenly trial. It just says, wickedness was found in you. Found, as if even God had to look inside to discover it. As if it grew quietly, invisibly, in the interior of a being that had no reason to want anything it didn't already have. Verse 17 names it, "Your heart became proud on account of your beauty, and you corrupted your wisdom because of your splendor." His beauty, his splendor, his wisdom, the very gifts God gave him, became the source of his destruction. He looked at what he was, the most magnificent being in creation, and instead of giving glory to the one who made him that way, he kept the glory for himself. That's it. That's the origin of evil according to Ezekiel 28, and not an external temptation, not a rival whispering in his ear. No serpent tempted the serpent. The corruption came from within, from the gap between receiving everything and deciding it wasn't enough. Now, let's bring these two threads together. Because when you lay Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28 side by side, two different prophets, two different centuries, writing about two different human kings, the overlap is staggering. In Isaiah 14, a brilliant figure tries to ascend above the stars of God, to make himself like the Most High, and is cast down. In Ezekiel 28, a perfect, beautiful guardian cherub, stationed on the holy mountain of God, becomes proud, and is thrown from the mountain in flames. Isaiah gives you the ambition, the 5 "I will" statements, the desire to ascend, to rule, to replace God. This Ezekiel gives you the psychology, the beauty that became pride, the wisdom that became corruption, the trade that became violence. Neither passage alone gives you the full picture, but together they create a composite portrait of a being who was created at the highest level of the heavenly hierarchy, who was given unparalleled beauty, wisdom, and access to God's presence, and who looked at all of it and decided it still wasn't enough. And then we get to the New Testament, and everything snaps into focus. In Luke 10:18, Jesus says to his disciples, "I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven." Not, "I heard about it." Not, "I read about it." I saw it. First person, past tense, as though Jesus was there when it happened, as though he watched it in real time. In Revelation 12, John sees a vision of war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was not strong enough, and they lost their place in heaven. The great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil, or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. He was hurled to the earth, and his angels with him. The dragon, the ancient serpent, the devil, Satan, 4 names for one being. And the text says, he was hurled, thrown, cast out, expelled, along with his angels. Not alone. He took others with him. Revelation 12:4 describes the dragon's tail sweeping 1/3 of the stars from the sky, which tradition has interpreted as 1/3 of the angelic host joining the rebellion. 1/3, 1 in 3. Whatever this being offered, whatever argument he made, or whatever vision of an alternative order he presented, it was compelling enough to persuade 1/3 of heaven's population to join him. And here's where it gets deeply uncomfortable. Because the Bible doesn't describe Satan's rebellion as an act of mindless rage. It describes it as an act of persuasion. He didn't storm heaven with a weapon. He made a case. He offered an alternative. And a significant number of intelligent, powerful, spiritual beings listened to that case and chose his side. That tells you something about the nature of the temptation. It wasn't obviously evil. It was beautiful. It was rational. It made sense, from a certain angle, in a certain light. The most dangerous lies always contain a kernel of truth wrapped in a magnificent distortion. Now let's go to the book of Job, because it gives us something no other passage does. A scene of Satan parading in heaven, in God's presence, with apparent access to the divine counsel. Job chapters 1 and 2. God is holding court. The sons of God, a Hebrew phrase that refers to angelic beings, come to present themselves before the Lord, and among them is the Satan. The Hebrew here is important. The text doesn't say Satan as a proper name. It says Ha-Satan with the definite article. The Satan, the accuser, the adversary. It's a title, a function, a role, like saying the prosecutor rather than using someone's name. God asks the Satan where he's been. The answer is chilling in its casualness, roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it, patrolling, watching, observing humanity, not tormenting them, not yet, just watching it. And then God brings up Job, and the Satan makes his argument. Does Job fear God for nothing? Haven't you put a hedge around him? Take away everything he has, and he'll curse you to your face. This is not a raging demon. This is a prosecutor making a legal case, a cynical, sophisticated argument about the nature of human faith, and God allows it. He gives the Satan permission to test Job, with limits. The Satan isn't operating outside God's authority here. He's operating within it, testing a boundary, pushing a theory. And that reveals something crucial about how the Bible actually portrays Satan. He is not God's equal. He is not an opposing force of equal power locked in a cosmic tug-of-war with the Almighty. He is a creature, a created being. Powerful, yes. Brilliant, yes. But created, operating within boundaries set by someone bigger. The story of Satan isn't a story about two gods fighting. It's a story about a creature who forgot he was one. Now go back to the garden. Genesis 3. The serpent. Revelation 12:9 identifies the serpent as that ancient serpent called the devil, or Satan. The being who fell from heaven is the same being who showed up in Eden. And what did he do there? He didn't attack Adam and Eve. He didn't threaten them. He asked a question. Did God really say? 4 words. The first recorded act of the fallen angel is not violence. It's doubt. He plants a seed of suspicion about God's character. He suggests that God is withholding something good, that God's boundaries are not protection, they're control, that the real path to becoming like God isn't trust, it's independence. Well, you will be like God, knowing good and evil. Listen to that promise. You will be like God. That's not a random temptation. That's the same ambition that corrupted the tempter himself. I will make myself like the Most High. Isaiah 14:14. The sin that destroyed him is the exact sin he offered to humanity. He handed Eve the same poison that was already killing him. And that might be the most terrifying detail in the entire Bible. Evil doesn't just destroy the person who carries it. It reproduces. It recruits. It wraps itself in the language of freedom and empowerment and offers you the very thing that has already consumed the one offering it. Now go back to the beginning, to that image from Ezekiel 28. The anointed cherub, covered in jewels, walking among stones of fire, perfect in beauty, full of wisdom, blameless from the day he was created. And he wasn't satisfied, not because he was mistreated, not because he was ignored, not because he lacked anything. He had access to the throne room of God. He was surrounded by beauty, by music, by light. He had the highest position a created being could hold. And it wasn't enough. That's the origin of evil. Not a lack of good, an inability to be grateful for it. Not a deprivation of beauty, a hoarding of it. The moment a created being looks at the glory it's been given and says, "This should be mine, not his," that's the fracture. That's the first sin. And it didn't happen in a garden. It didn't happen on earth. It happened in heaven, in the presence of God, among the stones of fire, which means the most terrifying place in the universe for evil to be born isn't a dark alley or a battlefield. What it's inside a heart that has everything and still wants more. And maybe that's why this story matters far more than most people realize. Not as ancient mythology, not as a superhero origin story for the villain, but as a mirror. Because the temptation that destroyed the most beautiful being in creation is the same temptation that shows up in your life every single day. Not the temptation to do something obviously wicked. The temptation to look at what you've been given and decide it's not enough. The temptation to compare your position with someone else's and feel cheated. The temptation to take the gifts God gave you, your intelligence, your beauty, your influence, your talent, and use them to build your own throne instead of serving the one who gave them to you. That's the oldest sin in the universe. Older than Adam, older than the garden, older than the earth itself. And the Bible's answer to it is not a battle. It's not a war between two equal powers. The Bible's answer is a lamb. A God who, instead of clinging to his throne the way Lucifer tried to seize it, stepped down from it. Philippians 2 says Jesus, being in the form of God, did not consider equality with God something to be grasped. The exact opposite of what Isaiah 14 describes. Where the morning star reached up, the Son of God reached down. Where the cherub tried to ascend, the Creator descended. The story of Lucifer before his fall is not ultimately about Lucifer at all. It's about the nature of pride, and the only force in the universe that has ever defeated it. The most beautiful angel in heaven looked at God and said, "I will take your place." And God looked at humanity, broken, deceived, fallen, and said, "I will take yours." That's not just a Bible story. That's the architecture of everything. If this changed how you see the origin of evil, the story of what actually happened in the Garden of Eden goes even deeper than you were taught, and the details hidden in the Hebrew text will change how you read the entire Bible. I break it all down in my next video. Subscribe so you don't miss it.